morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Indica Books Writers Workshop with Otis. We've been conducting this series since 2020, and by now, most of you should be familiar with how it goes. We encourage writers to send in writing pieces, short writing pieces to Otis, and every Sunday when we meet, we discuss those pieces. Before that, Otis will read, he will mark up, and he will send his feedback to you, and then we use this forum as a platform to basically get to know the nuances of writing, the do's and don'ts, and in general, everything from the mundane and the specific to the to the philosophical and otherwise. So with that preamble, I'm going to turn this over to Otis. And Otis, the floor is yours. And I think you said you have 4 pieces today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. I'm glad we're getting started nice and early. And then Abhinav, I think we'll talk about how we'll schedule, but I have 4 pieces today, so that works great. It's kind of a perfect number. So we just have to figure out what we'll do going forward so that we have a regular group of works to discuss. Pranshu, I think you have a review of Abhinav's book. So yeah, this is a little in-house. Might be some tension. Abhinav, you just have to keep it cool. Tell us a little bit about this review and who is it for?
So before we start, yes, Otis, I've told Pranshu that if I don't like anything in this review, then I will find him.
Right. Luckily, we only exist on the internet, so
I'll find his digital avatar.
That sounded suspiciously like Liam Neeson in Taken.
Exactly. I'm about a foot shorter than he is, but otherwise, I think I nailed it.
And Abhinav has 2 daughters also, so he qualifies for Liam Neeson. So so basically, when Abhinav had was about to publish his book, he had requested me to do a review on it, and so actually I have I know the source material. I read some of the rushes Abhinav was sent over, so it was based on that. And more of the thing I wanted to so Abhinav would tell you that, so I actually started writing it, and then I started writing it, and it became like a 5,000 6,000 word review. So so not only that, see, I wanted to emphasize a couple of things. This is actually a very beautiful book Abhinav has written. This basically is so in Mahabharata, there are like around 509 different subtales, smaller tales, which basically have some point or determine some moral point or something like that. But of only there are 67 of those which are actually identified as the with the title subtale. So Mahabharata calls itself a lot of things. It calls itself an epic. It calls itself a history. It calls itself, an epic history, and it calls itself a Ved. It calls itself a lot of things, and also calls itself a subtale. It's a subtale in the whole story of the human life as such. So of this, 67 of them are actually identified it, and this was actually first around 2005. Alf Hiltebeitel. So Alf Hiltebeitel was an Indologist who has done a lot of work on Mahabharata. He literally has written, so many reviews. Not only reviews, like so many scholarly papers on Mahabharata, that his number of scholarly papers actually are the same number, almost the same number, like around 6,000 pages, which is like the same number as the English version of Mahabharata is around 5,500 pages. So that was the one thing which Abhinav had basically picked it. And so initially my review actually also wanted to talk about Alf Hiltebeitel. Alf Hiltebeitel died this year. So that's why that term, he joined the Panch Bhutas. He passed away this year. So it was
He
like
passed away
also like
last
a
year, February
no, last year, yeah,
2023,
yeah, yeah.
2024.
Well, see, March 22, the year will not end, right? Our year will not.
Okay. You're confusing me enough with this. Wait, let's not
Sorry.
argue about the dates.
Yeah. So that.
Alf Hittebattle, if I'm saying that anywhere close to right, I'm just going for it. So he's a rather large. He's a luminary. He's a really big literary figure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it was also sort of initially when I started writing, it sort of became a homage to him, as well as another great guy the person who basically delves into details. So if you look at any Alf Hilterbattle page, like an article, so there'll be like a 120-page article he would write. 60 pages is bibliography. He covers a lot. So that was one thing I wanted to basically. Initially it became quite a big thing. Then basically, Abhinav said that nobody will ever write a 6,000 or will read a 6,000-page word review. So I sort of boiled it down. Another point I wanted to emphasize was that a lot of people write. So this is like over the last 10 years or so, you can see there are like around 500 various retellings of Mahabharata, books about Mahabharata. All of a sudden, like, it's a big thing but they are they actually vary from real kish, if I'm using the right word correctly, pulp kish, to basically profound. And so Abhinav's work actually stands on the other side of the spectrum. It is very, very it basically not only highlights all the 67. This is one of the things actually Hilderbeitel had once written, that he wants all these 67 tales in one book. So in a way, Abhinav basically completed his ask in this book. So that's what I wanted to emphasize. So the two things I wanted to emphasize was the connection with Alf Hilterbitel, as well as the what a good book about Mahabharata should follow, according to Pranshu. So my 5 shibboleths.
Okay. Well, Pranshu, this will not be the first time you try to do too much.
Yeah, that's true.
In a single piece. I think I was just sort of trying to think about this visually a little bit. I wish I often just do think visually and sort of diagrammatically, I guess. But before we get into that, let's have you read a little bit. Okay, so I have a section here. I don't know if that came out.
Yeah. So
maybe just read between those two pink sections.
I also like that completing Vyas nullifies the unfortunate adage that these stories, these subtales, are not part of the main Mahabharata. Some of these subtales are part of the main story itself, viz. Shakuntala, Yayati, Mahabhish, Ani Mandavya, Tapti, Panchendra, Sund Upsund, Saubhavad, Yaksh Prashna, Amba, Hans Kakya, Sudarshan, and Nakul are the stories which are integral to the epic. Other subtales represent powerful attributes of our culture. Shrangak Upakhyan is a story of the 4 baby birds saved during the Khandav 1 burning. The burning represents the renewal of the soil to replenish agriculture, to find new fields for growing population, and restoring forests and restoring forests as part of the parcel of the progress and life itself. And these 4 baby birds representing the 4 Vedas survive the fires of regeneration and rebirth, the bedrock of our Sanskriti, and giving truth to the term Sanatana, the eternal. Ramopakyan gives its name to the full-fledged Itihas in its own right, the Kavya Ramayana. And then there are the mirror stories, illustrating to Janamjay and the modern readers the travails of Pandavas in the forest. Ramopakyan, Nala Damayanti, Savitri, and Mudgal, among others.
Thank you. So I think probably to begin with, decide probably to do something simple and accomplish it. It's very difficult. I mean, Branchu, you obviously have an academic knowledge of the subject, and we've seen that over time, and so you can, you're talking about your this author, this literary figure, Alf, who has these bibliographies and references, and you, it seems, can also access those references, at whim. You have this sort of reference library. I know for me, I can't understand basically this at all. I mean, we could say that, I'm removed from the culture. So but I'm basically I'm dealing with foreign language, foreign cultural reference, extensively throughout this entire piece, including references to literary figures who I don't know. I mean, it has, if you went through this piece and you sort of highlighted just the nouns, right? I would find that there are a lot of nouns here that I simply have no reference point for. Now, you might not necessarily be writing a review for me, but I am a PhD in English. I can understand almost everything I read. I mean, I just really can, like I can understand legal texts. I can understand, esoteric philosophy. I can understand all these things, but I can't understand this piece. So you're not reaching me as a reader.
Okay, good.
You may not want to. You do.
No, actually, yeah, I would like to. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. So it's becoming more obtuse. Basically, the flow is becoming very obtuse. There are too many terms, too many nouns, as you said, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one way to think of it, but there is, like, even if you wanted to write, so if you wanted to write an academic article, so academic articles have certain forms too. And if you do want to write an academic article, it's good to learn those forms, and people do learn them. Like, I kind of learned them, because I have a PhD, so I was forced to write things that were academic-ish sounding. But my basis is in creative writing. So I always resisted this sort of obtuse aspect of academic writing. I mean, I always did. And it put me at odds with academics, because I was like, for me, the greatest purpose of our writing is to actually communicate with someone else. So like that's in academic writing, you'd be surprised. That's not always what you're trying to do. In academic writing, sometimes you use your academic writing as a kind of, it's a rhetorical device to basically self-select you as a rarefied person who's able to read an academic text. So you and 5 other people can read each other, and that's it. Everyone else is basically left out. And for some academics, they enjoy that. So they find their intellectual peers.
Peer review. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a kind of peer review. They show off for each other. They use the same jargon. They have the same basis of understanding. But what we're talking about with even, like, let's say there's 4 people who are able to peer review each other, or 12 or 20, they all share some kind of, they have a
lexicon.
shared lexicon, cultural experience, reference point, and they're all actually, so in classical rhetoric, you think about the base assumption. What is the assumption that everyone is sharing? So when approaching Abanov's work, I think one of, Abanov. So it makes it actually handy. This is another little point within this piece. Throughout this piece, it's clear at times that you do know Abanov. You should either decide that you are going to write a personal review as a person who knows Abanov or not. Okay. One or the other. So it's like a number of things that you have to choose. But because you do know Abanov, you can actually And this is, I actually like this as a review. Let's see, I'm trying to think when I've done this. I've done reviews, and I've actually also done interviews. So like another really great form is for you to to interview Abhinav and publish that someplace, like an interview with the author where you get to ask your questions and Abhinav answers. Then, but I will suggest you're not doing that live, right? You can just do that by creating an email, send a bunch of questions, but you still then want to formulate something that's going to be readable by the general public. Then some of your more, esoteric comments here, you could actually be using those not to kind of show off yourself, but to show off Abhinav.
Show the book, yes, exactly.
Right. You like, the question, like, it occurs to me that Alf Hittebetel wrote an article about these. Did that inspire you? And then that gives Abhinav the chance to say, well, Alf Hittebetel is, he's a luminary in Indic scholarship, and I admire him greatly. He passed recently. And then Abhinav can, wax poetic about, the Alf Hittebetel's work and its inspiration for him. That contextualizes it for the reader, and it also allows Abhinav, the person who you really want to highlight, to come forward. That's an interview will do that, to highlight him as an author. If you're reviewing the book, the thing you want to highlight is the book. But because you know Abhinav, you can also, talk to him. And not that you're going to write that necessarily. You may or may not, depending on whether you want this to be a review that has that personal element, which I think can be really strong. I would personally do it that way probably because it affords me much more ethos as an author to say, like I prefer, I have a friend, Leslie, and I would say, I know Leslie personally, and I know that these stories have such a profound meaning for him, and he draws upon his work from aspects of his life and blah, blah, blah. Like I would do that because that increases my ethos and I can probe even more deeply. It's not aloof. But there are different kinds of reviews. I mean, that kind of review is not always possible.
That's right. I think I'm doing too much in this. See, this actually started off as we actually I did an interview of Abhinav. So there's a YouTube video also on that. So I did an interview of Abhinav, and from the notes of that, actually, so the review is actually from those notes. So yes, you're right. But the thing is, that the essence of the question answers, because this is all the answers Abhinav gave. So that is not coming out because I try to do too much, as you said, right? I'm adding that the homage to Elf also. I'm also adding my idea of what a good Indic book should be. Just because I just read some lousy ones 3-4 days before actually writing this, so maybe that influenced a lot. So yes, you're right. That's a good idea. That's right. I'll go back to the original notes of the interview itself and then use them basically as the same points, and then it comes out much more clearer.
Oh, much more clearly, because so like even when you say that you've read some pieces from the Mahabharata and you don't like them, in the question and answer format, that can work so nicely. You can be like, Abhinav, again, be personal. The personality is what you want to come through when you're doing an interview, because that's really about the author. And that's people saying, wow, I really like this author. I want to read the book. A review of the book should focus on the book.
Right.
It's only mildly about the author. And it's more like it's really for a general group who don't know about the author and don't care about the author. They want to read a certain kind of book, and they want to find out if this is that kind of book. But like in the interview format, you can be like, Abhinav, there's, I find that there's quite a lot of work, derived from the Mahabharata, and I don't like most of it. that gives you basically you're pitching softballs. You know, they say
exactly,
like
and that's
cricket. Cricket, there must be there must be something in cricket where they just like bounce the ball. Yeah,
bowling, yeah.
And then you just give it to Abhinav to hit it out of the park, and you just do that over and over again. That's what an interview does.
In cricketing terms, that's an analogy. That's a full toss.
A full toss.
Yeah, earlier it used to be called like halwa bowling, you know, before our times, you know. Halwa is like sweets, you know, like a sweet dish.
Oh yeah,
so you're giving sweet dishes to the batsman.
But I mean, it's enjoyable. We love it. You know, I mean, I love it. So it's like, you know, I find that Abhinav. What do you think? He's like, well, yes, that did motivate me. I noticed that, you know, some of the works are very pulpish, and the characters are not really humanized in a real way. They're just represent stereotypes. And I feel that the characters of the Mahabharata are more complex than that. That's part of what I wanted to bring out in my work, that's what I wanted to bring out in my work. And then, but he doesn't, you know, toot his own horn. You come in and says, so it sounds like your aspiration was to write really a literary work. And then Abhinav says, yes, in fact, that's true, but I also wanted to make it very accessible. I wanted it to be clear, and I wanted it to be really enjoyable storytelling. I find the best literary work, the work that has lasted, you know, and then he waxes poetic about literature. We love listening to Abhinav talk about all these things. So that is great for, you know, that interview format is, I think, very powerful. It's very personal. I think it's Ben Franklin is, you know, an American founding father, right? He's the kind of tubby guy who had the kite, and, you know, in our tales of origin, right? He had the kite and the key, and then captured electricity, and there was America. Okay, so he's the founding father, but he wrote a book, his autobiography, and he talks about developing the persona of the humble inquirer, however you say that.
Yeah.
Okay, Pranshu, that is not what you're writing here. You're not a humble inquirer here. It's a little bit of a show off. I know a lot of stuff. That's not what you want to do. You be a humble inquirer. That's the persona to adopt, particularly to adopt that in the interview process, but in a way to consolidate that sense of humble inquiry into the persona that's presented on the page here, which, if you're writing about the book, focus on the book. The idea that, you know, you talked about, you know, a number of works come out about the Mahabharata, and then that's actually a pretty good starting point, you know? So what makes this one different? What makes this one special? Why is this the one to be read? You know, it's probably, and I'm going to guess it's a combination, if I'm thinking about it, and I would be jotting notes for myself about things that I want to cover. Abhinav, you write that you know, he's writing techno action thrillers, so he knows how to write something that is pulpish, right? That is thrilling, that is readable.
That's what I wanted to
page. Yeah. But he's also literary, right? So that he has those literary sensibilities, the depth of character, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so add that. And then he's also intellectual, and he hasn't, I wouldn't want to presume that you have an academic background. In my world, an academic background is a negative, so I don't, like, in my way of thinking of it. So you determine, you know, it's like academic, it's like,
but you've just seen what Bill Ackman has been doing.
Bar was aimed at you, Arun, specifically.
But those are great things to do. And then the other thing that I always do if I'm tasked with writing basically something about a book, the first thing I do is I read through the book, and then I take parts that basically have jumped out to me. I don't have to like everything in the book. I mean, I can review something positively where I don't like everything in the book, and maybe I don't even like the book, but I'm doing it for a friend. So that's possible. But when I read something, there are always going to be parts that jump out at me, and I take those and I type them down on a page. Then I figure out why I like them so much, right? I don't know why I liked them when I first read them, but they become these salient moments.
Right.
I use maybe 3 or 4 of those to string together my work. So now I'm presenting the work and coloring it a little bit, right? I'm spinning it but I'm spinning it quite legitimately because I have responded to it.
Yeah, and I actually have put those, all of them, but they are very far apart. Now I'm thinking you're right. See, what I liked about the book, what jumped out at it, I just have put all of those points, but they are like little far apart. And that's what I'm saying, that probably is because trying to cover a lot of things. So that's why they just got separated. So just put them together.
Yeah. Well, here you have this large, it's like you're doing a review of this sort of almost the historical context of this book, and the historical context of a book that's talking about the Mahabharata is a very long historical context.
Yeah, and you should blame Shivu for that. Like he always puts this, that the review should also put that book in its historical context, and I think that sort of was also on the back of my mind. And I think that's the thing. I was just, as you're right, I was trying to just put in too much into like the 1,000 words, and that's see how I do is when I get an idea or a thing, I actually write. I keep on writing till I fill out every point, and all the information I collect, I just put them together, and it becomes quite a big lumpy. And then only I go and edit. That's as I said, right? Like if I write 1,000 words, I'll write it like 7 times again because I just put in so much, and then I have to reduce that. So you're right. So I think when I reduced it, I actually didn't look at it as I just looked at it as a summary point of the what, not as a summary. I just actually just reduced. So that's the thing. Everything got separated out. So,
right. Well, so Branshu, I have total sympathy because you write exactly the way I write. I basically use typing to think. I am telling you, it is absolutely
exactly.
true.
Same thing.
In my day-to-day life, I do not think at all. In fact, I try not to. I don't think about anything because if I'm not writing it down, why bother? But in the morning when I sit down to write, I am thinking, and I'm either thinking, so those are ideas, or I'm imagining, and it's actually a bit of both. Because when I think within a persona, right? It's not me, I'm a whatever. But when I think and type, I'm in a persona, I have a point of view, and then I produce the material. It can be imaginative or whatever, but those things are always taking place. I always obviously have a point of view. And because I write fiction, I'm adopting that point of view. Or if I'm writing about another person, I'm adopting their point of view, or sometimes I'm adopting my point of view, right? Adopting my point of view, which is still, again, a literary construction for the moment. But I have sympathy. I use typing to think. And I produce a lot of words because of that. And a lot of those words aren't any good, but they end up taking me to a degree of clarity. But it can take a long time, and it is very arduous. It's a double-edged sword, as they say. But I would try and just say, let me do different things at different times. You have an interview. I would try and get your interview to be so. The interview, even if this is the result of the interview and you combine it here, I would try and have a version of the interview that was snappy and fun.
Right.
I edit interviews a lot because I'm a writer. I can write the dialogue in the interview better than the people can say it, and definitely better than I can say it in the moment. So I'm always going to edit that. And that's why I'm going to have things like, it's like, question, tell me, Abhinav, there's a lot of books about the Mahabharata. Why would anyone choose this one? Yours.
Yeah, and those are the questions. Those are the questions, and those are the answers. There's just I put all those answers in, like even these are his comments, like,
right.
these are like the from ages 8 to 88. Like that's actually Abhinav's own statement. But you're right. Like to convert it back into the original, like as a conversational thing. That
Yeah.
I will, yeah, I'll go back, and as I said, yeah, you're right. Like just trying to smash a lot of things into 1,000 words is not a right idea, and that's why I'll take it out. If we take out those 2 points, then I think it'll flow much better. That's a very good idea. I'm going to do that. I'm going to work on this and send it to you again, Abhinav. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, if you're going to write about the book, I would go through the book and I would take out a few, even if you don't use them exactly in that form, take out a few quotes that really affected you, because that's finally what matters. What matters in reading a book is not what happens in the intellect. What matters in a book is what happens, to the heart. That is the important thing. And that's what people actually care about. If they wanted to take a course in this work, they would be in the university and they would be, pursuing an academic career. And most people don't want to do that. Academic careers are actually killers of books. When I did my English PhD, I was like, these people hate books. They don't love books. They hate them. All they do is take books and use it for their own purposes to advance their own theory so that they can be somewhere up higher on the academic echelon. So things that move you and then go through. Yeah, Abhinav.
Oh, time check.
Okay, beauty. Thank you. I can deride academia for a long period of time, so we'll try and steer me away from that. But it is really true that academics do not, my guide is clarity, Pranshu. Clarity, focus. So the best writing should be like a clear pane of glass through which the reader enters a world. That world has to be very understandable. So as I said, when I write, I'm always adopting a persona. I think it can be great to, rather than try and make that an omniscient persona, as you do here for the most part, or kind of wavers between an omniscience and a first person, just adopt the first person.
Right.
You'll find, because when you adopt a first person persona, you'll find that you'll start to probe your truer heart, which is what you have to put on the page. Then you can see that you can have something about the book that says, as I was reading, I was struck by this line, and then you have Abhinav's words, which is great to present, right? So the reader is now reading his, and you're like, I've read about this character all my life, but I've never heard her inner, her inner self expressed with this kind of clarity and with such emotion. I was literally moved as I read it, and I looked out, I will do that kind of thing because that's what the reader of the review wants. They want to have an experience through you of Abhinav's work. And that leads them to, they want to have that depth of feeling too, like you did. So just be very clear about how you're going to proceed, what you're going to try and accomplish.
And another thing I noticed, as I sent it to you yesterday, I noticed I was rereading it, is that I actually followed the question sequence, and so I could change the sequence also, not all the answers. I mean, the flow could be better. I was just using sequentially all the questions, and those were put into the article. But instead of that, I can change that sequence, and that's another thing I didn't edit.
Right. So, and I would do that when you present an interview too. So if I do an interview, I definitely want to create a story shape in the interview also.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the questions could be all over the place, and that it was there in that. So that's one thing I can fix. Yeah, definitely.
I think I have an example of how I've done it. I think on the internet, there's a documentarian named Sam Green, and I think I have an interview. So if you look up Otis Haschemeyer and Sam Green, it should happen. I've done another interview. Interviews are so easy. I love doing interviews because it's great when you when you, what is that full toss? When you give someone a full toss, and it's wonderful to watch them hit it out of the park. And you feel like you're partially responsible because you gave them such a good pitch to hit, or whatever you call it. Bowl. Have I ever told you that I've played cricket? That's a story for another time.
Right.
Okay, let's move on. Madhavi, let's talk about your work. I think yours was the first that I got.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. You always got to say it like that, you know, Happy New Year. Okay, tell us a little bit about this piece.
Okay. This is a story I'm submitting for an anthology based on Dashavatara. That is 10 avatars of Lord Vishnu. So Krishna is considered as the 8th avatar or manifestation of Mahavishnu. So I had a task of bringing out the Purushartha, or the basically to know about his life, like what we learned from his life and all. So what I thought was, if I bring out one particular incident from his life, it would not do justice to the avatar. So I wanted to somehow, summarize everything. So that's when I thought of this introspection, or Simhavalokan, as it is called in Hindi. And that's what the story is about. Like Krishna, in his last moments of his life, he interacts with the person who accidentally ends up hitting him. And that's how Krishna dies. So before his death, there are a few things that he brings out. So it's kind of a summary of his life. Mm-hmm. And what good people can take out, what good humanity can take out and follow. So this first page is basically an introduction to a person who doesn't know much about Krishna, so that he or she understands what I want to tell in the story. The actual story begins from the second page.
Okay, so Madhavi, you mentioned a word just then, like you said in Sanskrit, there's this word for kind of introspection.
Simhavalokan is a word it is Simha is lion. So lion has this habit of traveling a distance, taking a pause, looking back, and on the trail that he has followed, and then course correction is there. So that is what Simhavalokan stands for.
Oh, I love it. I love that. Yeah. That's great. I would maybe think about it, put it aside, like maybe that can be part of the title. So I don't know how to say that word or how it's spelled, but and then the word of Krishna, so that it basically will summarize what we're going to get, and it presents and creates a kind of expectation for us. This is the thing that you're providing, is this sort of pause, which does occur. Yeah. That prepares us a little bit, because what happens is not quite a story. So when we come into this, we'll expect to have a story, and that's not really what you're doing. You're actually writing almost like a prose poetry in the section where you have Krishna before his death, before his wounding by the arrow, and you might think about it like that. I can think not all poetry is simply atmospheric. A lot of it is dramatic, but some is atmospheric. And I think particularly since you're providing this kind of poetic depiction of this moment of Krishna's, I think going ahead and gathering that in and announcing it a little bit is probably a good idea, because that would shape the reader's expectations. And then really they're going to judge your work based on how well you do that sort of poetic representation of these last moments. And there is a lot of poetry in that moment, the touching of the leaf, but right now, I think in that section, which is, so you have, to me, you have three sections here. You have this introduction, you have the section with Krishna, and then you have the section with the hunter. Yeah. So in that middle section, it's like you're trying to do two things. You're trying to have it be a story, which you know, because I bark about this all the time, has to be some kind of dramatic interaction between protagonist and antagonist, but there really isn't an antagonistic point there. So it's kind of going back and forth, but it feels a little bit forced. If you can drop that away, then just present your sort of poetic depiction of these. I mean, you're depicting Krishna in a state of acceptance of his own end, and it's sort of like, what does he do within that state? And I think that would be a nice thing to present. So let me have you read a little section.
Sorry about that.
I'm going to have you read this, maybe this section here.
Jara was in dire need of money. He had to meet the payment deadline he had committed to his landlord. He had to buy grains at any cost today. His wife was complaining that the children would become malnourished if this continued for a few more days. He had to make a good earning today. I can't make enough money unless I take a fresh scale to the market. I have to find a rich buyer to sell. But for that, I need to find this elusive four-legged beast. It will bring in a lot more fortune than small birds. Where are you, my savior? There it is. Behind the overgrown tree, by the upturned roots, Jara could see the flash of golden yellow. I found you, Jara thought as he crouched on the ground to a stable posture. He fixed his special arrow on the bowstring with his right hand and stretched his left arm holding the bow. He stretched it till his right thumb brushed his ear. Eyes fixed on his target behind the tree, Jara let go of the arrow. The arrow struck its mark, because the next instant he heard a soft ah.
Yeah, this section of Jara, I think is, for me, works really well, whereas the section with Krishna didn't, for the reasons that we've already talked about. But the section with Jara is great because he's a hunter. It's placed very much in very tactile, human, temporal concerns, right? Which I think is somewhat different. And I think the juxtaposition of that with what you present for Krishna in the same moment preceding will be great, because that's really what you're showing, these sort of temporal concerns. And then, this other sort of state. I think this is a really nice section. He needs to hunt in order to, he wants to find something big. Obviously there's an irony to where are you, my savior, right? The thing that's going to enable his sort of temporal condition to be alleviated, right? And it's nice, and I think that the juxtaposition finally of Jara and Krishna at the end of this is also, meaningful and emotional. I have a number of notes, and we're in the Krishna section here. So let me just go in order. So the first section basically presents, this idea of Krishna as an avatar of Vishnu, I think you said, and story-wise, it's a difficult character to deal with. Okay, I'd just be like, story-wise, it's a difficult character because
multi-dimensional characters.
Yeah, because a character in a story is a person who comes in with a problem. Basically, there's as we say, there's an unstable ground situation, So that's one way to think of it. Like there has to be a problem because the story is basically the solution to that problem, right? There's a problem that will be resolved because of the interaction of the story. Krishna, because he's the complete man and these other things, he has no problems. As just, I'm just being knee-jerk here, but knee-jerk, I'll be like, you're going to have trouble with this character in the story. It doesn't matter. They've started out perfect, and they're going to end up perfect, and there's no arc. So if you were writing about Krishna, and Krishna was the topic of a story, I would suggest to go to a place where there is a problem, because we want to go from A to B. We want to have an arc of character. So this is just a blanket statement for everyone, and just to emphasize sort of the principles of storytelling, that we can just apply wherever we want. So like, the description of Krishna here reminds me a little bit, I grew up in the Christian tradition. So we have Jesus, who, was a figure, much later, obviously only 2,000 or so years ago, at a time when there were, as you know too, a lot of wandering teachers and sages. But he's also somewhat depicted as, being perfect, right? Except for this instance before he's going to be crucified, when he is in olive grove and it's the passion of Christ, it's called. Basically, when he wonders why his God, his Father, has forsaken him. That is, in some ways, the most interesting part of his story, if I can say that. The moment when he has doubt, and he has to basically move through that doubt. It's not even resolved, in a sense, in my imagination of it anyway. So that becomes a more interesting instance of that character. And if I were writing a story about Jesus, I would probably pick that instance to dramatize, because it is dramatic. I think the same might be true of Krishna, and I'm sure that those stories exist. But if they don't, then he does become a difficult character to write about. And that's just, again, this is just boilerplate, that we can sort of apply as I apply to all the great literature of the world with barely a concern. Then let's talk a little bit about this next section. So Krishna, in basically at this moment, I think, like I say, I would try and, really write it as, right now you have a sort of drama between him and the natural environment. I might not do that because it can seem a little bit forced. He has very few actions. Mm-hmm. And you're doing it right. I mean, we've talked about these kinds of things too, like his recollections are triggered, but really there's no action to what he's doing. I would think, I would probably try to contextualize this a little bit more if I'm imagining he's in a human form. So I would try and enter into that imaginative space as much as I can. If he is feeling that this is the end of his temporal existence as a mortal, he probably has, as some people do, he may have stopped eating, right? So he has there's some physiological things that are going on with him as he's essentially leaving the body. The arrow is just the last moment of it. So I might try to fully imagine that, and you'll see that even as I bring that up, it's sort of juxtaposing with Jara, right? Because Jara is hunting for food. So Krishna is not concerned about food anymore.
Yeah. Sorry, interrupting you in between. The thing is, just before this happens, like just before Krishna is shot, he has seen a great massacre happening in his family. His whole family, they just fight amongst each other and they kill. So everybody is killed. He sees his elder brother going into a Mahasamadhi and his soul leaving his body. So that is the experiences Krishna is carrying with him when he's wandering in the forest, waiting for his end to come. And since he is the Bhagwan himself, he is not perturbed. But he just makes a passing comment that I wish somebody was alive, somebody was, good enough to be left behind. So there are a lot of curses and all the stuff that I bring up in the story later, why this happened and how things turned the way they did. But that's how the story begins. So even I thought that this particular opening is a bit shaky. Nothing much is happening. So I was debating whether to start with Jara. But since the story is about the avatar himself, so I have to give Krishna's point of view or the author's point of view before Jara enters the picture. Because ultimately Krishna leaves the world, but Jara is the one enlightened and left behind. And there's a series of interaction between them. Jara and Krishna, they are in conversation throughout this whole story, wherein they bring out certain incidents that happened in Krishna's life. And then he gives out, life lessons that why this sort of thing happened and what is the takeaway from that.
Okay, I think I understand. So are you saying that this story will continue to be a dialogue between Krishna and Jara?
Most of it is like that, yes.
Beautiful. Okay, great. So then I would probably, rather than have him reminiscing through these sections, I would depict, so like what you're describing to me of a person, he's just seen his family basically, implode upon itself. I'm imagining it for myself, if it were me, he's in a kind of shock, right? It's not necessarily, so that's a different impression. If my character is leaving that scene and going into this moment, they're a different character than the ones that's depicted to me here. It's a character who's more in shock. Doesn't mean that he's not doing things, and it doesn't even mean that there isn't a kind of enlightenment to be had within the state of shock. These are all sort of interesting things to consider, but it's somewhat different than what I'm perceiving here as I read it, because I didn't know that previous story. This is a person who's like a sage to me, who is reconciled with their death. They've done in the Christian tradition, we have someone who's written, all is vanity, but you also know that as well from your traditions. You give up all things. That's the transition. All is not lost, but given away. So yeah, I like him. If he's, if I were depicting it in a movie, right? You don't necessarily have to deal with that previous scene, because I think you believe that your readers will know that. And there's a lot, let's say that even without your reader knowing that, the setup of the story will let the reader know that there's always a backstory, and we understand that the present story is built upon the backstory. So, this is like the character, it would be overdone to have him stagger into the scene. If I were visualizing it, he staggers into the scene, but he wanders into the scene. He's clearly somewhat disoriented. That's how I would depict it if I were shooting it as a movie, and he would, but then as he's walking, and I used to do this with my daughter when she was upset a lot. I would take her outside and I would bring her close to a tree. And then eventually she would look at the tree, and then she would touch the tree, and then she would stop crying. So I think that there's something to, this character who comes and he touches the leaf, but he might pass by it, right? If I were shooting it in a movie, I would have him touch the leaf and pass by and it glow as he passed. He doesn't even know that it's glowing, right? And then he's touching things and that, like I would think about it like that, but I'm trying to depict a kind of psychological experience through these visuals. If you write it, you do that interiorly, right? That he walks through, he touches, the leaf seemed to illuminate and become golden as he passed, to the brook. He listened to the gurgling that sounded like a song, whatever. That's the kind of poetic environment I might create. This makes a lot of sense to me as an introduction, a kind of conceit that allows you then to have the conversation between Krishna and Jara. Is that a traditional story that the two of them talk and then Krishna shares his story with Jara, or is that your convention?
He dies instantly.
Okay.
But there are many stories out there. People have tried to imagine what it would have been like if they interacted. But when Jara reaches him, he's already dead. That's what the general consensus is. So that's why I have said in the introduction itself that it's an imaginary account, because I don't want people to say that
that never
he's
happened.
depicting something wrong.
Well, I have a more fluid vision of how things do and don't happen that they're not necessarily constrained by space and time. So, I could see just as easily, I would probably argue it did happen. Who could say that it didn't? That in the moment of Krishna's death, Jara understood the totality of Krishna's story. That seems completely reasonable to me. I don't know what is that. Someone might say, "Otis, you're crazy," and I'm like,
kind of a disclaimer over there.
Yeah, since I don't believe in the space-time continuum, I think that it's possible. So, who's to explain what enlightenment is? Anyway, I think it's a beautiful beginning. The sentences are so crisp. The section through Krishna here, I would point to was some problems with it. So I would try and write it, as I said, in that sort of prose poetry to just capture that last moment and just focus on that. I wouldn't go elsewhere. Just try and capture that last moment, because we'll hear, and a lot of your readers will know those other stories anyway. We don't need them. We don't need the give and take and the kind of the kind of force dynamics that we have here. I would instead just try and make a totality. This is his state at the moment of being struck by the arrow, and then Jara comes up, and that's your conceit for the rest. It's coming along beautifully, I think.
Thank you.
Arun, shall we move on? Shall we talk about your work a little bit?
Sure.
Where are you? There you go. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Hope you're doing well. You had a good end of the year.
I did. It was okay. My poor daughter, my youngest daughter, had her femur broken.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Horseback riding. I mean, just kind of a terrible accident. But it's amazing how resilient.
And hopefully she'll get back on the horse quickly.
Yeah. I mean, definitely
won't let it deter her from riding, no? The fear of falling down.
Yeah, and hopefully, with some lessons learned too. So, because we can't repeat that. We can't ride horses and fall up. Tell us a little bit about this piece.
Okay, so this is a book that I started. the piece is about, so there is a wedding that happens between a princess of a territory, of a smaller kingdom, and a prince of a bigger, the son of an emperor, who's a crown prince. He is a debauch. He is not a very, he's not a very pleasant individual. And she gets married to him because of, politics. Basically, she doesn't have much of a choice. And so she gets married to him. So this chapter, in a sense, moves pretty quickly, because it starts off with her registering her protest, but then giving in, going through the wedding, and then what happens on her wedding night and post that, right? And because that's a smaller part of this. It's not the major part of a story, but it kind of sets the tone for her relationship with her husband. This is, interestingly, it's a true story. It's a play that has been lost. A fragment of the play has been found, and I'm basing my book on that little fragment that has been found. So,
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And what is your strategy for the book? Is it covering more characters? You're not just simply, it's not concentrating just on this young.
No. So she's an important character, along with another guy who she eventually, I guess, gets together with. But at this point in time, it's just there's a lot that happens, right? They go away. There's an enemy attack, and all of that happens. She plays an important role in it, in terms of she is kind of the fulcrum on which the story changes after that enemy attack.
Okay. So what's your strategy for using point of view in the work as a whole?
Yeah, I knew you were going to get to that. I saw you. We have this conversation many times. So usually the way I do it, and the way I've learned from you, is in every scene I have a character whose point of view I take, right? Now, in this introductory scene, you are right.
You're not holding yourself to this strict taskmaster that I've become.
Yes.
Okay.
In the introductory scene, it's as if I am a camera that's following the girl as she enters that room. She stalks through the corridors and enters the council chambers. Okay?
Right. Okay. So this is where we get to something I think very interesting for us to think about when we're writing. Words, because they can so often be subjective, are always basically representing some kind of point of view. Like, I just look, you always drag me into these great sort of like intellectual conversations about what words do. But you see, yes, you would say on the one hand that you have essentially a kind of limited omniscient narrator who is watching these characters like a camera. But that camera also makes subjective determinations about these characters from time to time, and that's when it becomes kind of wonky, right? So I just, like, on this first page, so even the first sentence, the young girl marched through the corridor of the palace, her hips swaying seductively. Who thinks that?
Yeah.
Does the camera think that? Arun?
Yeah.
No, the camera does not think such things. The camera just simply records.
Correct.
So that's when this is where we usually get to, we show, we don't tell, because I mean, that's the mantra for us writers, but basically that's a shortcut for us understanding that we need to write with objective detail when we're being, we need to write with objective detail, because if we don't, then the question is, who is having this subjective experience? When we have a subjective experience, it must belong to somebody. But if we have a limited omniscient narrator, right, so they basically don't exist, they're omniscient. Omniscient both means they know everything, but also they're not a temporal human being.
I'm just to play, you know how ordinary I can get. So just to make this interesting, right? So the way I write, right? It plays out like a video in front of my eyes. Okay. And that's maybe my challenge. Because what I do then is I describe the scene as it plays out in front of my eyes. Okay.
Yes, I get this. I get it.
When I was writing this, I was following the girl. I was one step behind her as she walked.
Yes.
Right? So that's the mindset with which I wrote this.
Right.
Now what I'm going to ask you is this. I want you to forget that you are a professor of English and writing and all that. Does this convey to the average reader a sense of what this girl is about, or does it detract from it? I genuinely want to understand that.
So I think,
because you have, because you have said that, yeah, sure, don't tell is the mantra, but you've also said, but all mantras are, all rules are meant to be broken, and you've also, over the past, several sessions, you've also given examples where it's been done. So I'm just asking you whether it still holds, or whether you can break it.
So the issue for me is I can't really, I don't tell you any of the things because I'm a professor of English. I tell you everything because I'm a person who interacts with the words and I have an experience with the words.
Okay.
That's the only reason I say anything. All the things that and it's been the same for me, like developing all the things that I've said. Someone told me show, don't tell. And I mean, I don't want to tell you what was in my heart at that time, but mine is don't tell me what to do, right? I have to either figure it out for myself or I cannot do it. I am a very resistant and rebellious person. I do not take direction very well. There's a number of people in my life that can attest to this. So it's only that. I don't want, because I am so rebellious, I do not want to have feelings imposed upon me. I want to have all my feelings for myself. It's just this is my nature. So when I have a line, the young girl marched through the corridor of the palace, her hips swaying seductively, I'm like, that's being imposed on me. And I don't like it. That's it. That's it. It throws me out of the story. I mean, who's seeing that? Yes, I understand it is you imagining that. That is your subjective opinion of it. But I'm like, where is my freedom, my personal freedom, when all I have are these words? It's being depicted with bias. I mean, is one way to call it, right? A look of fury is down here. That's bias. I'm not perceiving that for myself. It is being told to me, and that is a corruption of my soul, if I can be so over the top, right? And my argument, when we talk about like the average reader versus me, is that what I believe to be true is that I'm just ridiculously sensitive to this, this is my great skill, is my sensitivity to these points of view and these various subjectivities. I'm extremely sensitive to it. I've had to grapple with it myself because, of course, I have all of my own biases, and I have deduced that they inhibit my ability to connect with my reader. I hold myself to that standard then, because the greatest thing I want to do is actually connect to my reader. If I want to express a bias in my work, then I have to attach it to point of view. That is not an omniscient narrator. You could write this first thing. It's like you could write, I imagine, right, the young girl marching through the corridors. If you wrote, I imagine, I'm completely with you, because now I am in your subjective consciousness and I am completely and happily located there. I'm experiencing your subjectivity. But if it's omniscient and subjective, then I rally against that, because the omniscient point of view is my point of view, right? That's when we give an omniscient point of view, you basically draw the reader into having that point of view. And then I'm in that point of view, and yet I'm having thoughts about either the seductiveness of her hips or not. And I'm like, but I'm not having those thoughts.
So
right?
in general, don't you relate to an omniscient point of view, or is an omniscient point of view a lesser option than the other, let's say a first person point of view in that sense?
I don't think the omniscient point of view can work. I mean, I write in limited omniscience for sure, and first person, they all work. They just have to make sense, basically, because the point of view ends up being a merger. If you say I imagine, and I've actually used that very phrase to set up a chapter in my book. You know, I'm imagining another character somewhere else. I'm owning the fact that it's my imagination of their experience. In fact, I even want to highlight that rather than just write it from the omniscient point of view. I want the subjectivity of it to be understood, even though I write everything very objectively within it. There isn't a better or worse. It's just that when our point of view in writing is the nexus point of the reader and the word. But if that word represents something that's incongruous, it cannot be a merger, right? If you were filming it, right? So like, it's interesting. You talk about like you write it as if you're filming it, but you're doing two things. You are both the camera and you're also the viewer with a subjective point of view about what's being seen.
Yeah.
That is our experience when we watch a movie. We're watching a movie and we, as the audience, are having feelings about it. But you're including both. And so you're both being the camera and you're also taking my job as the audience, because it's I who should be seeing the girl walk down the hallway, and it's me who should be having the feelings about it's this way or that way. And it's up to you to create the image that makes me feel, not to tell me what the feeling is. Because now I've suddenly been thrown out. I don't even matter in this experience. Or we're basically, you know, on top of each other, right? We both agree that this is the experience, or we don't. And I don't necessarily agree.
Okay.
It's another way to say that, like, that point of view that you're representing is a male point of view, right? So we could say, I could be your reader and I'm a male, and I could be like, yeah, sure, I'm with you. I'm with this guy. But I don't want to teach you to just write for a bunch of guys who are going to agree with you. I want you to reach every reader who picks up your book. Right?
Yeah. I think
I'm not. I don't want to teach anyone here to write for a club. I want you to all be able to write for a universal audience, because the greater the audience, to me, that's the estimation of the work. But I also think that paying attention to these little things allows us as writers to actually perceive reality more so, right? We actually, as writers, by understanding these issues, rise out of our own bias and are able to see better, actually see reality better. Because this is not real. What you're depicting here with bias is not reality. It is a point of view, which would be fine if you recognized it as such.
Got it. This is why I send in my snippets to you.
So I think that there's a lot that's really great about this piece, actually. And at first I find this girl to be a bit of a stereotype. They seem like modern stereotypes. So like it's as if they were in a modern movie and they have sort of modern expressions.
I'll tell you the reason for that, right? It's because fundamentally, I don't think human behavior has changed over time. Right?
Oh, I agree with you.
So when I write about these girls, I don't think I think of how my daughter would behave, and I don't think a strong-willed girl 2,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago would have behaved any differently. And so that's kind of why I write it that way.
Right. It's just that a little bit with I agree with you. I mean, I think she would behave this way because it is, in fact, the way that I behave all the time. I mean, just as I don't like to be told what to feel and think about your first line, or the look of fury and temerity. I don't like that. I don't like being told what to do. I don't think any human being does. We all want to have our own autonomy, and it's a difficult relationship that we have with those authorities that can basically control what we do in certain circumstances by social or whatever. Every single human being has that. So it's not just the girl but I think that here a little bit we might consider when we narrow it to think about, the girl is the same as, let's say, my daughters. We're creating a stereotype of the girl rather than finding the deeper humanity that we might try and access. Because we start to establish these ideas of stereotypes over time. That's where stereotypes are coming from. And I think that, again, I'm a very difficult taskmaster with myself. This is why you are all punished, right, for this.
Yeah. But here in this particular case, I actually think I'm going to push back on it, because I think I'm actually generalizing a deeper aspect of humanity by thinking of the girl this way, in the sense that this is a strong-willed girl, and she's young. She's only about 18, which in those days was actually pretty mature, because they would get married by the time they were 15 or so. So she is strong-willed, and she doesn't like it, and so she's putting her view across. Now, maybe I can rephrase it a bit if it sounds like it's a little stereotypical, the description. But that
I think that's the issue. I mean, I think that the emotions, the dynamics of the situation, yes, I think that those remain quite consistent over time. I think I think it gets wrapped up in that I do feel the male point of view in your omniscient narrator. And then when you have an omniscient point of view that's sort of sneaking in there, and then you say something like, she's a strong-willed girl. It's like, well, it's not a strong-willed girl. We are all strong-willed. There's not a strong, there isn't a stereotype of strong-willed. We all, we share this. There's not, So showing her character rather than showing her type.
Got it.
That's the thing that we're after, I think, in general. I believe you're thinking about these things, and then obviously when we talk about them, we grapple more, and I think we both hold each other to the same high standards, right? So we're in it to win
this is good. I like jousting with you because it gives me creative, it kindles the thought process a lot more.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, basically, I think the act of writing, what is that? That's self-flagellation, like it's like that's it. Go do better, do better, do better. Yes.
Yeah, the piece that I found difficult, actually, it was tough to write, was that scene where the wedding, the night of the wedding scene where.
Yeah, and I actually think you did that well. I mean, I think it's this beginning is. It has just some ways things are expressed. It feels like it's a modern stereotype. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, it's not like I watch movies with my daughters, and we have these same tropes replayed over and over again, but we don't want them to appear as a trope.
Yeah,
that's right. I mean, it's the nature of our business that we are writing things that are recognizable human experiences that other people will see and recognize as human experiences. If we wrote something that was not recognizable as a human experience, no one would read it.
I'll tell you why I'm smiling, because over the course, during the break, my daughters and I were watching these random Christmas romances on Netflix, and we were basically calling out the tropes before, so we predict ahead what was going to happen.
Right. We do it all the time. It's a mother's dead story, right? It starts out the mother's dead already.
Or the small town, or the girl goes to small town story.
Yeah. My daughters, they force me. I don't know how many times we've seen Daddy's Home 2. Daddy's Home 2. We see over and over again. It's like their favorite movie. It's like a traditional camp. So yeah, I think that you actually handled that. Abhinav.
You talked about tropes, Otis, right? We don't want to write characters as tropes and stereotypes. But here's a question. See, the first time a character is written in a particular way, the second time someone writes it, doesn't it risk becoming a trope? I mean, how many times or how many different ways can you write something that doesn't feel like this is a trope? I've read this before. This is a stereotype.
Well, that's what so I didn't say we don't want to write tropes. I'm saying that unfortunately, of course, we do, but we want to try and Ezra Pound, and let's face it, he was a fascist, so he was a poet and fascist. He said, "Make it new." There's a kind of when you're the author that makes it new for your audience all the time, there's a certain relationship of power that I think we could draw our attention to. But the thing is, we do use tropes. I'm very conscious of that. We have archetypes. We've read our Joseph Campbell. We know the hero's journey. The hero with 1,000 faces is talking about a trope. I mean, that's a trope. And we see origin stories repeated over and over again. We can watch Marvel, or we can, go to some of the most ancient stories. Our desire for an origin story exists. Our desire, there's the sage, there's the king, the corrupt king, there's the pure warrior, we got it all. I think we want to try and reach deeper than the trope, though. I mean, I want to see, the heroic, in everyone. I want to see the corruption in everyone. I want to see, they're human characteristics that end up being parsed out amongst people, right? That's my feeling. But yeah, we deal in, like I said to Arun, if we wrote something that was completely novel, no one would read it or be able to understand it. I mean, language is developed on stereotypes. I'm not to be too philosophical, but when I write tree, you wouldn't understand what that was unless we all agreed about what a tree was, basically. So is a tree a trope? But these are the issues that we want to be grappling with. They're the issues that I grapple with, and yes, they probably are driving me mad, but they are the issues I'm dealing with. And that we just, I think it's in the end that we
it's later on. It's further down, that piece that I was talking about. After this, he walked in much later.
Otis, why did you circle wicked grin? Why did you circle wicked in wicked grin? You scroll up a few lines, so maybe half a page.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask you that as well.
Right, because again, this, who is perceiving that as wicked? Who thinks of it as wicked? Who's the viewer? So that's a subjective phrase.
Well,
I mean, again.
Okay, so here's this, right? So if I'm showing a group of girls discussing, I am showing it as a, I would prefer to show it as an omniscient point of view, right? So I'm not Dhruva or Chaya or one friend or the other. I'm the roving camera in this case.
Right, but you're the roving. So when I'm shooting the movie and I shoot the movie and I show this grin, who thinks it's wicked? The camera?
Well, everybody. It's self-evident that it's like a twinkle in the eye.
No, my friend. No, the audience thinks it's wicked, right? This is what we do. This is how we draw the audience in, whether it's in a movie or whether it's in our fiction. We we create the pictures. So in the movie, they create the pictures, but I, as the audience, have the emotions. Wicked is kind of a thought, but it could be a terrifying grin. It could be, but who's terrified? The audience is terrified. We're the ones, when you have that objective camera, the audience brings the emotion. If you have an omniscient narrator, the camera cannot feel the emotion.
So how would, okay, so let me ask you this, right? Let's do it right here. So if I want to say, so Chaya has this, she's the friend with the comebacks and the one-liners and the sly remarks and right, and she's got this wicked naughty little grin. Now, how would you tell the reader that without? I mean, how else would you do this? I genuinely want to understand how to do.
Yes, and I'm going to give you the answer, Arun. This is the definitive answer. This is our art. This is our medium that we have to deal with. So either you can cut corners as you're doing, and that's anyone's guess. I'm not a person that's going to say, go ahead and cut corners. In fact, I'm just saying, what I am truly saying, it's all a risk-benefit ratio. I'm just circling that word saying, you know what? And I'm not there with some calculator. I'm just reading along and I'm like, wicked grin. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, who thinks that?
No, so Otis.
And I go bing, bing, bing. So it's up to you to think. So like for me, what I would do, ooh, he is delectable, or what, said her close friend, Chaya. She twisted her sorry into a little knot and tied it. He's so behaved. I would have it be an action that depicted her, let's say, wicked or lascivious or whatever it is, thoughts. I would have that expressed in action. Or I would have it, or I might have the friend says, Chaya, your grin is positively wicked. And she says, is it? I know.
Okay, something like that.
Right? So another character perceives the wickedness of the grin. Your grin is positively wicked, Chaya. And it's like, is it? I don't care. Right?
Okay.
Now,
Got it.
This is exactly, but if it were filmed, right? if it were filmed, we would see her and we would have her
I think
grin, and then the reader would think, oh, that's wicked. But if the filmmaker was insecure, right? If they were insecure, if they didn't think that the actor handled the moment well enough, they would have
somebody say
they would have the character say, I feel very wicked, right?
Yeah.
They would have some dialogue. There's a famous moment to me, you know, we all know The Matrix, right? There's a famous, when it opens up, Keanu Reeves is being chased around his office building, and then like the only place he has to escape is out the broken window. And he has this look on his face, and then he says, why does everything happen to me? Okay, that's an insecure filmmaker, right? He should just look that way, and the reader thinks, why does everything happen to him? They understand it because he's emoted it through his facial expression. But they did not have confidence that he was able to pull that off. So he also iterated in dialogue the emotion that we were supposed to receive.
This happens in Die Hard as well, Die Hard 2, where he goes, Bruce Willis goes, another Christmas, and you know, why does it happen to me? He actually says something very similar.
Right. And in a way, it's also it's the artist's insecurity, the actor's insecurity, the scriptwriter's insecurity, but it's also, to me, it's also a way of saying the audience is stupid. So they're not going to have these emotions unless we spoon feed them to them. And so that's what I get here. When it's a wicked grin, then I'm like, didn't I already understand this wickedness from, oh, is he delectable or what? I've already understood it.
Yeah.
I've already understood it. So to say that it was a wicked grin is now redundant. Again,
I think it's my okay, so my strength is that I see it playing out in front of my eyes as a video, which allows me to write extremely fast, right? But that also is an inherent weakness, and I'm understanding that now, because the point of view piece gets messed up because of that. And I think I need to pay more attention as I'm writing to the point of view, which maybe I don't do as much in my first draft as I ought to. Yeah.
Well, just look at it this way. I mean, we're writing, and you know, God knows how many words I've typed, but every time I'm writing, I'm practicing just what I said to Pranchu in the beginning. I'm always adopting a point of view. So I've practiced adopting a point of view for thousands and thousands. You know, I'm like the infinite monkeys that type, you know, to create all literature. I'm always practicing that one thing. I'm not just writing without it. It's a muscle. It's simply a muscle.
So before every scene, I guess what I should first do is, okay, whose point of view, which character am I going to look at this scene from, and then write it, I guess. Maybe that's one way to fix it.
Right. Well, you see, like, so when I'm writing a limited omniscience, I will choose, we usually don't write just simply limited omniscience. We write a third person limited omniscience, which means that we selected a character that is our point of view character. And that means that we can hover along with them like we're sitting on their shoulder all the way through. But I will do this definitely, you know, with my point of view character. I can move that point of view into their head if I want to.
Yeah.
So I think of it as like an onion skin. She saw him, he approached, he smelled of prunes, he smiled at her, there were beans in his teeth. She thought, oh no, I am never going to marry this man, right? So like I've moved through the sensory perception to the thoughts, and then back out again. She turned and left the room with a quick step, right? So I'm moving in and out. I will do that. You'll notice that with your little line here with, she said, with a wicked grin, I moved the point of view by having someone express in dialogue, your grin is positively wicked. Is it? I don't care. So I move the perception of the wickedness into a point of view that gets expressed in dialogue.
Right.
Because I, as the omniscient narrator, and we always are a bit of an omniscient narrator, we're including things like he said, she said, she walked into the room. She's not perceiving herself walk into the room. We're perceiving it. So we always have this mix of a narrator and point of view, and we're working with that. But I'm restricting, I've practiced over time restricting my point of view, and so that I know it very well. And I practice it obviously when I read too, and when the point of view is violated, is one way we say it. When that point of view is violated, I always notice. And then I've been talking about it for so long that I can, give a tongue lashing to everybody after.
No, I think I need this regularly, so that every time you beat me on the head with the point of view, I go back and write better.
Yeah, this whole section here, I would actually write from your main character's point of view. And I think, and what ends up happening is you end up having what we get out of it, the benefit of that is that we draw the reader into that girl's experience. And then we imagine that experience is more intensely felt than simply watching it like a camera would watch it. And I do make this point, I don't think that we should use writing. These are my lofty goals. Movies do a great job of showing images. We can do a great job of both having images, but showing interior point of view.
You've mentioned that before.
Right. It's as if, like there's a few experimental movies make a first person point of view, but videos do, right? I don't look at any of those videos or use them, but they basically are first person point of view. We can create a first person point of view with any character. And then it brings us to this point where we can write works that allow the reader to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. That's a very, very powerful experience. Yeah. Those are the big guns that we actually have in our writing work. And I think that we should use the things that we have available to us.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is you can write it very quickly and then hope it gets taken by a movie. So,
yeah, but I'm not writing for a movie. So I'm writing. I'm happy that I'm starting to recognize where I'm going wrong with certain things. So hopefully over time that, it becomes muscle memory, like you said, for me.
You are doing a lot that's right. You are doing a lot that's right. You're imagining the work. You have been doing that for a long time. You clearly have you drop into the world and you imagine it. The thing that you're not doing quite is separating out your subjective interpretation of the world you're imagining. That is sort of like you haven't quite left yourself behind, but you will. I start writing work and I'm imagining it. I leave myself behind.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing experience. Yeah, we better move to Ram.
Yeah. Otis, time check. Correct. Yeah. Okay, I think this is the last piece, right? Ram's piece is the last one.
It is.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, I'm keeping you up late.
Thank you, Ram, for your patience.
No, this is actually a fascinating discussion, and I hope we can extend the discussion today up to 11 at least. I have taken copious notes, and I hope I'll be able to remember some bits of this. And in fact, I discuss Otis points with my wife so much that when I show her something I have written, she's like, no, you got wrong the POV here. You got this wrong here. Where is the conflict? No, it's 2 pages into the story. There is no conflict coming still. So she's like my first point of criticism now.
Yeah. I've had people say that my voice is like a little parrot on their shoulder, like,
No, they're wrong. It is a parrot inside my head now.
Oh, good.
But
I'm sorry, Ram.
No. So I was wondering that someday I should write something that Otis will say that, okay, I have nothing to say. Then I said that, no, I don't want that, because I want to know how I can improve.
Ram, it's going to be impossible. There's not a single thing that I read of my own that I feel that way about. So
absolutely, absolutely love your feedback. And a lot of times, I say, whenever your session is on, it makes me write, because the last year has been one of the most abysmal in terms of writing output for me. But I was very happy when Abhinav said that we are having your session. So I just pulled out something, and I have not done a great job on this, but I said, no, let me at least start something.
Okay, Ram, let's dig into yours. Can you read between, actually, I have this first pink line, and then I have the lower pink line. So let's introduce both the tree and the bird.
Sure. Many thousands of years ago, the forest covering the land of Ikpoksa, where the Ajnamar people lived, was greener and denser. The streams were clearer and sweeter, the sky bluer and brighter, and all beings, birds, beasts, and trees, were kinder and smarter. They could also speak. In the heart of that dense forest was a giant tree. He was the tallest in the entire forest. He was so large that perched on the top of his crown, you could see at eye level the tip of the distant hills behind which the sun went to sleep every night. His canopy was so large that it spread 200 arm lengths around his massive trunk. All manners of birds and small animals made their homes on the tree. They reverentially called him Papa Tree. Papa Tree accommodated them all. He was kind, but he was also proud, because he could see the farthest. No bird could fly to the top of his crown. Everyone but Gilla the eagle. Gilla could fly to great heights. He flew so high that his wingtips were scorched by the sun when he flew too close. Naturally, Gilla was a proud bird.
Okay, great. Yeah, we set that up. When I read that, I was like, I see. We have a little conflict here. I like this piece very much. I will say that I feel like my one comment would be to try and have you knit this story. So we have the large tree, and it's wonderfully written too. We have the large tree. There's the eagle. Both the tree is proud, but then the eagle realizes it essentially can go everywhere, and that has this sort of, maybe larger pride. And then the large tree and the eagle have an argument, essentially, about who is more deserving of this pride. And essentially, the tree takes the eagle's point that the eagle can go anywhere, and sees and experiences a much larger world than the tree could ever realize. This shocks the tree, that then begins its kind of descent, right? It's it begins to die because it's perceiving its own limits, in a sense. Maybe we could say it like that.
That's true.
I sort of want the story with the sapling tree seems to be completely independent of the story of the Papa tree. And I actually just want you to knit those two together, if that's possible. I mean, this feels like it feels like a folk tale, but I think that you can go ahead and take your artistic license to basically create a little stronger narrative sequence between these two events.
Okay.
So basically it might mean writing a scene in which the sapling tree discusses, with the larger tree, like, Papa tree, why are your acorns falling? Why are your leaves turning brown? And then, the Papa tree can say, well, it's because the Gilla, is it Gilla eagle?
That's right, Gilla, yeah.
Yeah. It's because Gilla told me how I couldn't go to the mountains and how I couldn't see where the sun sets, where the sun rises. So like basically you have a scene there that equates the Papa tree's death with this experience of the eagle, but also essentially motivates the sapling tree to go beyond those distances.
It's interesting you should say this, because that's how I had written the first draft.
Mm-hmm.
So the first draft had that piece where the sapling tree, he sees that his father is withering away, and he feels sad. He asks why, what is happening. So there is that link. It comes in a slightly different manner in the first draft, but two things happened. One is the length was a little longer. It came to almost 4,000 words, and I said that no, I have to submit a shorter piece, so I cut things out of that. And also I felt that maybe it was a little rambling. So I cut out that piece entirely, but I see what you're saying, that right now it looks like two independent stories. There is no link between the two, whereas that link could bring in that emotional reason of why that small tree wanted to fly.
Right, exactly. It's the motivation, and it's sort of the narrative continuity. That narrative continuity, it's striking me not because it doesn't exist. It obviously exists. We can see that there's a sequence of events, but you're basically leaving out one of them. Correct. And because you leave that out, it seems like it seems like we have a kind of non sequitur. But I can also see that there's a narrative in which this is not a non sequitur. We just don't have that other element, which also I think the reason that it's so necessary is that it's probably the greater emotion. I mean, it's that sense. It both describes something that happens with the puppetry, that once his sort of pride was damaged, once he didn't perceive himself as being the be all and end all of the universe, which is kind of what we're saying, and the eagle basically, informs him of his delusion, then he begins to die. When he sees that he can't be everything, then he also starts to become nothing, right? So I think that's a kind of profound statement, and a profound psychological statement to be made, and it makes sense to me a little bit, and then that the discussion of this limitation is also what creates in the sapling tree the desire to, in a way, create and make, because that's what the sapling tree does. It makes a kite, right? So it's describing this sort of kind of primordial force of death, mortality, and a desire to engage in making. It reminds me in its way of, I know the Sumerian epics, better than some others, but Gilgamesh. Right, Gilgamesh is the person who has a confrontation with mortality, and then at the end of the story, he's the person who built the walls of Uruk. Right, he becomes a maker, and that's his answer to mortality. He becomes immortal through the making, and I think that you have that story here depicted in this really charming natural world, and I like it.
So there was something that I wanted to also ask you. I was very fascinated by the discussion that you had with Arun, because I think that a lot of us write like that. We see what is happening in front of our eyes, and that's how I write too. But what happens when I do that is that I have a lot of information which I know, but a lot of that does not get translated to the page, because, like, for example, if I'm describing that, okay, a person is going, I see in my mindset that he's an old man. So I see him walking like an old man, but I might not be putting that on the page. So the reader might not actually get that it is an old man. So because I'm already imagining the entire sequence or scene in my mind, I have a lot more information, and I'm sure whichever way authors write, the author has a lot more information, but a lot of that does not get conveyed. So then again, we come to what you always say, that it is always a choice that we have, that how much space do we take up for everything on the page.
Right. I mean, in the movies, it's kind of easy for them because they do have the camera, which takes in all the light that's coming off of all the things. But they have things that are center stage, they have things that are upstage, they have things that are backstage, they have things that are clearly peripheral and backdrop. When we're dealing with words, it's like our words are like pixels. Like if your camera can get whatever 50,000 pixels, we can get like 5. You know,
That's true.
so we have to do as much with 5 pixels as they do with 50,000. This is the nature of the beast. We either put more words down, or we're selective. I mean, this is the difference between reading Ernest Hemingway and reading
Joyce,
Cervantes or Joyce. You know, like
true.
What Tolstoy. This is part of the agony of being a writer. So,
I mean,
Ram, just embrace it, enjoy it. I mean, if it's important that the guy is old, then we have him. You know, he lifted his leg onto the rock, stepped up. Ugh, he said, how much farther? Right? I know he's old. We in writing, we are writing the tip of the iceberg.
True.
Where is the iceberg, though? The iceberg is in the heart and soul of the reader. We write the tip of the iceberg so that the audience becomes that iceberg underneath the water.
Right.
They fill in all the rest. And which is true. I mean, if we just go back to that sort of philosophy of like, okay, I write the word tree and we know what we're talking about. But I could obviously write, you know, 1,000 pages about a tree and every single aspect of it. But I count on us having some common experience, and it's the relationship of understanding that common experience with our reader that we depend on all the time. I think we better wrap it up because Abhinav is going to sleep. Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Sure.
Good night, Abhinav. Well done on your book.
Thank you, Otis, and thank you, everyone. It's been nice to do this after a break, a mid-year, year-end break, and I thought it was very useful. A lot of different things we discussed, including reviews and point of view. Point of view again for the nth time, but still very important to do point of view.
I think if I have a section, there'll be a point of view conversation after every one of mine.
Exactly. So we will see everyone the next time.